Hello. Well, today is the fateful day. I have done as much painting as I feasibly can, and I've exhausted all other ways of delay and prevarication. So now I'm forced to do what I've been dreading for several months. And that's what this video is about. Slightly this way, isn't it? I had not foreseen that the bed of the lathe would have been fixed to the base with some kind of bedding compound, and of course that was broken and destroyed by lifting the bed off with the crane. So I had to completely remove that bedding compound and get back to bare metal. And I now have the task of re-bedding the bed onto the base. And I have been very uncertain as to what the correct way of doing that should be. I had initially taken the view that the bed would have been ground and hardened by itself, and that therefore the correct way to fit it onto the base would be with a three-point mounting, so that you didn't impose any twist on the bed. But the fact is that there were 4 shims under that bed, 2 on either side of the headstock and the tailstock. So that rather negatived that idea. And then I thought, well, this lathe is 35 years old. It must have been carted around and moved from place to place quite a lot. There's no particular reason to suppose that the bed is still in exactly the same condition it was in twist-wise as it was when it was first ground. Maybe what I should do is look at the bed and see whether it's twisted now if I put it on a 3-point mounting, and then consider whether, when bolting it back onto the base, I should try and correct any twist that is present. Another aspect of it that has been bearing on my mind is that I think this base is quite rigid. Although it's made out of welded steel, you know, it's quite big plates at right angles to the axis of the bed, and I don't think that it twists easily. So if I were to bed the bed onto the base without regard to what twist it has at the moment, and rely upon jacking up the whole lathe afterwards and hoping that that would twist the bed back to straightness, and I'm slightly doubtful as to whether that would actually work, or certainly wouldn't work unless I bolted the base to a strong concrete floor so I could apply a twist forcibly to the base. So I'm pretty sure if I just jack up the base on one corner, the other corner just comes up into the air. It doesn't seem to twist much. So those were what was going through my mind as I approached this task. This is the back of the lathe bed. Some big shell mill has come along here and milled it all flat, including those 2 blue bits there. But there's nothing that is fixed to this flat surface except the DRO and the coolant pipe. And it was painted before, so I'm going to paint it again. Well, I've put the primer on, which has to be mixed up in a ratio of 8:2. And of course I mixed just not quite enough. So there are bits of it down there which I haven't yet got at. I've done that side, which you can't see because it's too dark. And I've had this bed in 2 different orientations on the wood blocks here. But what I want to do is put it down like that now, and I can't do that until this is dried. So I'm just going to have to do the primer in 2 coats. Right, well, let's finish the primer undercoat. I can't really paint in those places in there. I'll even get it clean in there. And I haven't bothered to paint in the two end bases, which I don't think ever were painted. If they were, we'd have to use a sprayer to do that, and I haven't got one. Right, that's the first top coat on half the thing. I'll have to let that dry before I can roll it over and do the other half. Right, I've finished the painting of this lathe bed. It's been a right pain because I can't paint all of it at the same time. Half a tick that way. This one. Well, that's as near as I can get it. So I was just wondering how straight this bed is when it's not under any constraint. So at the left-hand end, which is the headstock end, I've got it supported on this side and on the other side on the wood, whereas at the tailstock end it is just sitting on that narrow strip of brass, so it's basically free to rotate about the axis of the bed at the tailstock end. And looking at the two V-ways, it's plain that they're not at the same height, and they're cut off at different heights at the apex. But I was thinking that the two flat ways are probably at the same height. It doesn't actually matter so long as I continue to measure always on the same thing. So, as this is the easiest thing to measure, I can't put a V block on this because it's not at the right angle, this V, unless I made a bespoke V block. So I've got these two 1, 2, 3 blocks here supporting the level. So that's about as level as I can get the headstock end. So if we now move the level to the tailstock end, we'll see what happens. Well, we can see that the bed is tilted like that. This end is higher than that side. I can't totally level this because it's just not flat, but what I've got it is so that it's sloping very slightly this way, let's say away from the headstock. And that's true there, there, and there. And then I've got it sloping like that towards this hole rather than that side. not so much that way. And then here it's slightly sloping down towards that. And in terms of this too, it's also sloping that way. So that's more or less, I've deliberately exaggerated that slightly because I don't want coolant water settling round the headstock. I'd rather it went this way. I can more easily mop it up round the tailstock if necessary, if it doesn't go down that hole. So I've got the base mounted up on these wooden blocks. It's got to be up in the air so that the legs of the engine crane can get underneath it. They can just get between, through the gap in the middle of that base. Right, well, I'm just wondering if I can lower this onto here without disrupting anything. Get it onto these temporary bolts. I'd rather be at the headstock end, but the control is here, so put up with that. We need to come back a bit. Up there. Until it come down that fast. Right, that's over those two. It might work. Again, I can't sling this so it goes exactly horizontal. Over there. The tailstock's got to come up a bit in order to bring the bed level this way. It's just got to come up about that much, which is, I think that's 4mm. So I've got a couple of wedges in at this end to bring this, make this bed level according to the yellow spirit level. And that means, well, that's about 10mm above the base here, whilst at the headstock end we're still flat on the base here, and obviously it's lifted this up a bit more at the front as we tilt the tailstock up. Now, as that stands, I would need to lift this side of the headstock up that much. What is that? that much, couple of millimetres, to bring it level this way. Right, let's see if we can do it this way. Right, so as I've got it now, it's level this way and also this way at the headstock end. There we are at the headstock. Right, here we are at the headstock end. This isn't really doing anything at the moment, this is just up in the air. That's finger tight. And you see it's like that, which is as I expected. That's definitely news, damn it. This thing is so bloody sensitive. Right, well that's near as damn it level on the tailstock end. We'll just check the headstock again. Right, there we are on the headstock. Close to being level. What I'm thinking is that I'll leave this overnight. Obviously on these wooden wedges is not sensible or permanent in any sense, but I wanted to establish roughly where this should be, and then I can make the appropriate shims out of metal. One problem I have at the moment is that this corner of the headstock is right on the base. So there's no room for any bedding underneath there. Whereas this corner has got, 6 or more millimetres. So what I've established is that this arrangement is basically feasible, but it's going to be very difficult to get it in position quickly, given the pot life of the bedding compound. Right, well I made this aluminium wedge yesterday. What I'm going to do is use it to measure the height. Nothing is totally accurate, is it? Which is the trouble with life. 3.5. So I'll measure the height of all these wedges so that I can make shims of the right thickness. Right, well I've made 3 shims of the exact right thickness to put on 3 corners of this lathe, the 4th corner having nothing on it, and I've recorded the overall heights so that I know how much of the bedding material to put down. What I'm going to do now is to glue the shims in place. Right, so I've glued those shims down. Well, I can't really film this because I've got to mix this epoxy. It only has a short pot life, and then I've got to spread it on here, which I've started doing, and on here, get it to the right height according to this, and then lower the bed onto it and hope for the best. So I'll see you when I've finished that. Well, I mixed that epoxy on Saturday afternoon. It's now Sunday afternoon, and I'm in my garage, which I've left closed as much as I can, and I've got 2 3.5 kilowatt heaters going in order to keep the temperature up, because normally the temperature in this garage is about 15. It's now 19.5 degrees C. It says the epoxy doesn't cure below 16 degrees C, so I'm going to give it another night before doing anything. I'll just show you I could not bed this down without kind of making a slight mess around the perimeter. But this epoxy can be sanded, so I'll just sand it and repaint there. That's the headstock end. Here's the tailstock, the big mess under there. You see how far up it is at this end in order to get it level, and this side likewise. I've done these nuts up kind of medium torqued, so when I'm satisfied that it's dry and finished, cured, I'll put the correct bolts in and torque them up to a high torque. Meanwhile, what we've got at the moment at the headstock end what's that? 3 ticks this way, and at the tailstock end it is 1 tick that way at this end. Alright, so they're not identical, but they're as near as damn it. Okay. In any case, the final levelling has got to be done by taking cuts and adjusting the twist accordingly. So I'm quite pleased with that, so long as it doesn't change when I torque the bolts up. We'll discover that tomorrow. Right, well, the epoxy is completely hard here, and it is sandable. This is an ordinary wood rasp. So that means that I can clean it up where it looked a bit dirty and repaint those bits. In case anybody thinks that it may be a bit unwise of me to put this lathe bed so far up under epoxy resin bedding compound, I calculated the pressure exerted by the bed on the base, on the swarf tray, and I was very surprised at how low it is. I've done this calculation several times just to check. So the bed weighs 199 kilograms and its weight is biased towards the headstock end. So I've assumed that 70% of the bed weight is on the headstock end, plus the weight of the headstock itself, which is 78 kilograms. And it's all resting on a pad, the one that we've just been bedding in. I've calculated the area of that, so this gives me a pressure of 40,000 pascals, which is equivalent to just under 6 pounds per square inch, an incredibly low pressure. And similarly for the tailstock, an even lower pressure. So the actual pressures on this bedding compound are low. And then if we look at the spec of the bedding compound itself, its compressive strength is 68 megapascals, so enormously much more. And its adhesive tensile shear is 18 megapascals. So, this thing is well able to handle any forces exerted on it by using it as a bedding compound. I'm not saying this is the ideal bedding compound. It's the only one I could find which was epoxy and which was ceramic filled, which is what I wanted. Because I kind of thought the original bedding compound looked ceramic filled. Right, well, I'm just replacing these bolts with the correct ones. These are M12. The maximum torque you can apply to an M12 bolt, 8.8, is 99 Newton meters. So I'm doing this. I'm doing these up to what? Can't see now. 40 Newton meters at the moment. Come off. Go on down there. When we've done them all up to 40 Newton meters, I'll review the situation and see where we are, level-wise. That's the original bolt. Slightly awkward to get at this. I'm using a longer bolt here to take account of the fact that it's higher up. Alright, we'll do it the slow way. Everything's at a slight angle on this thing. But this bolt was slightly too long. Here we go. Right, well, that did actually make a difference to the thing. Let's do this to the same torque. Right, so with all the bolts, all 8 bolts tightened up to 40 Newton meters torque. This is a tailstock. It's 2 ticks high at the front. And this is the headstock, which is bang on the level. So now I wonder if I can bring them both into level by adjusting the levelling feet at the bottom of the base, down by the floor. Right, here we are at the tailstock. So we want to lower this side, which is the front side, by 1 tick. So I will adjust the nut down there. It's got to go down, so it's to undo by a very small amount. Oh, that was too much. takes quite a long time to react with these very fine adjustments. Well, I think that's as near as damn it. Right. So now let's go and look and see what effect that's had on the headstock. So the headstock is now slightly high on this side, which is the back. So what did we do? We lowered the tailstock over there in that corner. We lowered that. I'll try lowering this corner. Too far. Right, well that's bang on. We'll go back and look at the tailstock. Well, there's the tailstock. I think that that's as close as I'm ever going to get it, and that I do have the ability to adjust each end independently using the levelling screws at the base on the floor. So that's good. I don't see that, I'm completely happy with that. It doesn't tell me how straight it's going to cut until I actually do a cut, but that's a good starting point, isn't it? In any case, I've got to move this lathe now. So my next step is to get this lathe, as it is now, through this door into the workshop. And I've got various bits of timber, a high lift jack, which I happen to have anyway, one of those low lift jacks, this wheel thing, and also a bloody enormous yellow thing, which was far larger, turned out to be far larger than I kind of thought it was looking at it on the PC screen. So with those things somehow, and those rollers from down there, somehow I'm going to get that lathe up this step and into my workshop.